Hi, I'm Drew Schlatter. I'm with Legacy Consulting Group, and my unexpected hobby is 4x4 off-roading.
Welcome to Unexpected Hobbies of Financial Advisors, the podcast where we interview fellow financial advisors about their pursuits and pastimes beyond their professional persona, some of which may be surprising to their colleagues and clients. We're interested in what makes them tick and how their unexpected hobbies might or might not relate to their everyday lives. Here's our discussion with this week's guest. Welcome to the Unexpected Hobbies of Financial Advisors podcast. I'm Brian Wright with Fiduciary CFO. And alongside me is my co-host, as usual, fellow financial advisor, Joshua Walker.
It's good to be here today, Brian.
Yes, it is good indeed. And we have a doozy today. This is a hobby I know of, but something I've never done and don't know much about. So we're excited today to be talking with Drew about his unexpected hobby, 4x4 off-roading. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So how did you get into this hobby?
So I've kind of always had an interest in it, but it's kind of relatively kind of a recent thing that I've gotten into. So growing up, living in Texas, I think everyone from Texas goes on summer vacations to Colorado because it just gets way too hot here for us to stay.
Makes sense. Elevation.
So yeah, the elevation, cooler weather, it's fantastic. And you get to get outdoors, which in Texas in August, you can't really do, or you pay a price. So we would go up in the mountains of Colorado, and I just remember going up there, and a couple times my parents rented Jeeps. And so we'd go up on these, rugged mountain trails in Southern Colorado, which now I know that those are some of like the most iconic trails, the ones that we go on, Cinnamon Pass and the Alpine Loop and kind of the Durango, Southwest Colorado area. They're kind of these legendary trails. But as a kid, I just knew like, this is really cool. It's beautiful scenery. You get to get out in the outdoors, and it's kind of difficult. It's something it's a learned skill. I mean, there was one time that we were up there with my parents, and I think we were in my mom's old Chevy Suburban, like a mid-90s Chevy Suburban, like this big white monster that I eventually that was the car that I learned to drive in. And we got up there and it started getting super narrow, and it's this just shelf ledge with a sheer, couple 100-foot drop off on one side. And it got too tight. The Suburban, I don't think, was actually 4-wheel drive. And so my dad had to back the Suburban down the trail, like back down the mountain. Yeah, backwards. So they had me, my mom, my sister get out. I was, I think, like 6 or 7 at the time. So we had to walk down the trail following my dad as he backed it out.
Which gives you even more appreciation of the beauty of the landscape, right? When you're walking back down the trail.
Yeah. I mean, it is, because you're, as scary as it is in the vehicle on these rock ledges, if you're on foot, it's really not that intimidating to be walking down a vehicle trail, but you just get to see these huge open vistas and gorgeous scenery, wildlife, all that kind of stuff. So growing up, I really enjoyed those trips. So I've got very fond memories of those kind of trips with my family. When I got out of high school, spent 2 years in college, and then I joined the Navy. And I was a naval intel analyst, but then the second half of my time, I was in for 10 years. The second half, I got stationed out in Coronado, assigned to some SEAL teams, and they put me through all of their tactical training, which included off-road driving in Humvees and shooting from Humvees while they're moving and all right, this.
We're just going to talk about this for the next 45 minutes. This is fascinating. So
New plan.
Yeah. No, sorry. Continue, please.
No, yeah, that was a blast. A lot of skill learning. At one point, we were driving at night, full speed, headlights off. If somebody had been standing out in the desert, they would have just heard the hum of a Humvee's engine.
Thunder.
But they wouldn't have seen anything. We all had night vision on with infrared headlights. We could see like it was daytime. driving full speed, pitch black, dark out in the California. That was wild.
So once you do that, there's not a whole lot that a trail in Colorado can throw at you, right?
Well, it's a different type of driving style.
It's different. Okay.
And that's one thing I've learned doing off-roading is depending on where you're going, I always kind of thought of it as just a skill set. Like you learn to drive off-road and then you can just drive off-road, but it really depends on the terrain. There's guys who grew up in Southern California. They go down to Baja. They've done all their driving out in the desert. And then they go up into the mountains and they're not used to these sheer rock cliffs with boulders that'll punch your tires or kick your car 6 inches or a foot the wrong direction toward the ledger. You get guys or they'll come to like East Texas and get out into the piney woods where we've got thick mud and stuff, and they'll get stuck in mud. Or you get guys who grow up driving on rock. They don't know how to drive in sand. So it takes different techniques and different skill sets and kind of an adaptability to be able to drive in all these different terrains. So there's a lot to learn with it.
We have the idiom horses for courses, and I'm guessing it's the same sort of thing, that depending on where you are going to be going and the terrain that you're facing, you'll need not just a certain set of skills, but a different kind of hardware as well, right? The one vehicle for one situation would be a really bad idea someplace else. No.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how specialized your vehicle is. If you set it up as you can set up like a general purpose off-roading vehicle, and then you can take it pretty much anywhere. If you set one up like the Baja style trucks, some of those aren't even actually 4-wheel drive. They're just got powerful engines, big knobby tires. They're rear-wheel drive because they don't necessarily need the 4-wheel drive for some of the dune stuff that they do. They wouldn't do so well on some of these other terrains. Some of these with big mud boggers and all, they're not going to fit on a trail in Colorado. They put these massive oversized tires on it and half their tires hanging off a cliff. But if you're not going to the extremes, if you got a general purpose Jeep, maybe you've lifted it, put some steel armor on it to protect the vital parts, and you've got the right tires, you can take that to most off-road places, whether it be dunes or mountains or mud. And if you know what you're doing, you'll be fine.
And in general, can you get there without having to do anything fancy, like put it on a trailer or in a toy hauler? You can navigate the interstate as smoothly as the other terrain as well.
As long as you don't get crazy with your builds. So there's guys who go out there and they build what are called buggies. And it's basically like a dune buggy or go-kart you think of for kids, but make it car-sized and then put a big exposed metal frame over the top is like this massive roll cage. And then they slap in these 800,000 horsepower engines and they get pretty wild with them. Those are not going to necessarily be street legal. So those they throw on a trailer and they haul it wherever. If you're more on the end where I am, where I put a mild lift on my vehicle, I've got 35-inch tires, which by normal standards, those are huge.
Yes.
But in the off-road community, that's still pretty moderate.
Run of the mill.
I didn't have to do any, all the modifications that I've done on mine are stuff that you could do in the driveway.
But that wouldn't fit inside the wheel well, right? So well, I guess let me ask, what are you currently driving? What's the current vehicle of choice in your household?
So right now I've got a 2004 Lexus LX470, which is the same vehicle as the Toyota Land Cruiser 100 series. So the early 2000s Land Cruisers.
Okay.
Same vehicle. When they sold them, Lexus and Toyota actually sold them for the same price, or within like $1,000 of each other.
Market segmentation.
The Land Cruisers had a little less wood trim. That's the difference.
Okay.
Essentially. I mean, there's a couple other nitpicky things, but for what most of us would notice, they're the same vehicle. One of them just has a Lexus badge.
Yeah. And you said an 04, so this is celebrating its 20th then this year.
Yeah.
And how many miles on a vehicle like that if you're using it for fun and profit?
So this one has 256,000 miles on it.
Okay.
So it's just now starting to get broken in properly.
And you said 35-inch tires.
Yeah. So I've got, if there's anybody out there listening to this that wants to know actual size ratings, they're 285, 75 R18s. So
Of course, yeah.
Oh, the R18,
The-
you have to get the R18. That's a must.
So those are all technical specs on how they measure tire sizes. The 285 is the width of the tire in
Centimeters?
millimeters. No, millimeters, because centimeters, that would be 2 and almost 3 meters wide. So it's
Oh, yes.
285 centimeters. The 75 is the ratio of the sidewall to the width. So you take the width of the tire, multiply it by 75%, and that gives you the sidewall. The R18 is the diameter of the wheel that it goes on.
Okay, so 28.5 centimeters, 3/4 of that gets added to 18. So, yeah, I mean, to me, that sounds like a big thing. And how much would that weigh? That's got to be a few hundred pounds.
Yeah, they're heavy. I don't actually weigh the tires, but they're a lot to lift.
Okay. And how long will they last?
These have a 60,000 mile warranty on them.
Okay.
So,
And where do you go to get this sort of thing? I'm guessing it's not, we got a Bell Tire next to the office. They don't have these on the shelf. You have places that you go to do this sort of thing?
So you can get them from custom places. I've been getting mine from like Discount Tire or National Tire and Battery. I got this set. I ordered them off of Tire Rack and then had Firestone install them.
Okay.
So your normal places, the normal tire shops carry these. They might not have it in stock that day, but usually, for the size that I have, they're popular enough that if you order them, they'll have them there within a couple days. Sometimes it's like next day.
And I'm guessing tire professionals are eager for the opportunity to do something other than an '05 Saturn Relay or a Honda CR-V. That when something interesting comes in, that's a change of pace.
I would think so. A lot of the guys at these tire shops are kind of into cars in one way or the other. So
Yeah.
either they're into like, high performance like racers or something, or there's a lot of them that are into off-road vehicles. And that's kind of in the off-roading world, you kind of have 3 different segments of four-wheel drive off-roading enthusiasts. You've got your Jeepers. So those are the guys who are really into Jeeps.
On
And
the
there's Jeep clubs everywhere. Then you've got the Toyota guys, and I'm part of that group, Toyota and Lexus. And then you've got everyone else who drives, whether it's a Ford or a Chevy or anything else. That segment doesn't tend to have as big of like clubs and organizations and events.
Even with the resurgence of the Bronco? There's like a Bronco gang out there now?
This
There
sounds like
probably
high
is now.
school.
Yeah.
Yeah, it very much is kind of high school. And some of so I've had both a Jeep and I've had the Toyotas. My first 4-wheel drive vehicle that I owned was a 2007 FJ Cruiser. I got that when I was stationed in the military out in San Diego. But then a couple years later, I ended up getting a 4-door Jeep Wrangler. And so I joined the North Texas Jeep Club and was going to all the events and stuff. And anytime you end up in like an echo chamber like that, it gets really fanboyish, and it's like, oh, Toyotas with their independent front suspensions, those are awful. They can't do anything. You might as well drive a minivan. It gets dumb. But the problem with I ran into that one is the Jeep was spending more time in the shop than I was spending on trails. And the
Ooh.
damage was like the breakdowns and all were occurring on the road, had nothing to do with going off road. Just the radiator gave out, all sorts of stuff that Jeeps
Mechanical.
are actually, Jeeps are kind of notorious for not being highly reliable.
Yeah,
No.
the guys I know that own Jeeps know how to work on cars. So they're
And
That's
that was the
probably a
thing in
good
the
thing,
Jeep Club. Probably 75% of them that were in the club, probably 75% were mechanics, retired mechanics, or shade tree mechanics. And
You have a
then,
favorite socket wrench.
yeah, if you understand why a 10 millimeter socket is like the holy grail, then yeah, probably, because that's just the running joke, is that 10 millimeter always goes missing. It's the one size that nobody can ever find. We all have 5 of them, and you can't find any of them.
So talk about these events. Like you mentioned a couple of times, like events. Like you have clubs where everybody gets together and probably drinks coffee and bashes the other makes and models,
Tell me it's not coffee.
depending what time of day, I guess.
Okay.
But I guess they're mechanics, so I
Yeah.
guess depending on time of day, it can be anything.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
but like the kind of the social aspect, at least locally, and then what are the kind of the more like, do you guys go trail drive? Is it driving or I guess off-roading? Do you do that together as a group, or is that an independent activity?
No, it's a group kind of thing. So depending on what club you're in, they'll have regular meetups. Most of them do like a once a month meetup where they'll meet at a local restaurant that's maybe owned and operated by a club member. So a lot of them are big on supporting small local businesses because a lot of people in the clubs are small local business owners. So you'll meet up once a month, do that. A lot of them will say, hey, we're going to go to an off-road park once a month and do a meetup there. And then let's say it's on a Saturday morning. You get there Saturday morning, 7:30, 8-ish usually. Everybody starts airing down their tires. So when you go off-road, you don't want your tires aired up to street pressure.
Rocks. Yeah.
Yeah, rocks.
Need a
And
little give.
by deflating the tires, when it flattens, you get larger surface area on the tire. So you get better traction and it makes it less likely to blow out your tire. So you spend the first 10, 20 minutes standing around, yakking, airing the tires down. And then generally you divide up into multiple groups based on skill level and kind of the capabilities of the vehicles. And then you go off and you do trail runs all day. Most of the clubs I've been in require or strongly suggest everybody have a radio. So you've got handheld radios. I've actually got one built into my vehicle. So like I look like a trucker because I got like the dash mount thing, pull it down and talk into it. So you're able to communicate with each other and you really get to know each other on these trails. And one of the things that was really cool when I first joined the Jeep Club, first time I was out with them, we were going up an incline and my Jeep got stuck, backed it up, went again, and the front drive shaft snapped, just sheared in half. And so obviously couldn't continue driving. But I was halfway up an obstacle. So the front tires were up on top of this 3-foot ledge and the back tires were down below it. And it was off canter, meaning that it wasn't just that I was like this. It wasn't just this. It was also like that. So it was a really awkward position to be in. But the other guys in the group stopped their vehicles, hopped out. They helped me, like we all pulled our tools out. They helped me pull the drive shaft while we're sitting there on the trail. And that's the good thing about being in these groups. I do not have a mechanic background. I'm happy to get in. Like if somebody will tell me what bolt to turn and like what wrench, I will get in there and do it. But I don't have the level of know-how that these guys do. And the guy that jumped out of his Jeep came over and helped me. He owns and operates his own Jeep shop. Like that's like his whole life revolves around this stuff. So
he's
totally,
prospecting when he's out there on the trail. He's finding new customers.
Yeah. And it worked for him because that's where I took the vehicle to get it fixed. But he spent 45 minutes with me underneath my Jeep, pulling out this drive shaft. You make friendships like that on the trail. So you get into these sticky situations, but that's kind of how you build relationships.
Yeah. And is this on public land or on private land or a mix of depending on where you're at?
So here in Texas, we don't have a whole lot of public land. Like I think it's like 97% of Texas is private land. So there's really nowhere to do public land stuff. But the city of Bridgeport, which is this small town northwest of Dallas, has an old rock quarry that they've turned into an off-roading park. Okay. So that's awesome. But it's a municipal city-owned property, so it helps fund whatever their tax money goes towards. So that's one location. And then we've got another one about 2 hours east of us out in Gilmer called Barnwell Mountain. It's a joint of a privately owned and Texas state funded off-road park. And that is where they hold Toyota Jamboree every year. And it's the largest gathering of off-road Toyotas in North America.
It's the Sturgis of your group.
Yes. Yeah. We've gone several times now. Didn't get to go this year because of other stuff going on, but it's first weekend of May. So was it last year? The first day was May 4th. So the whole theme was Star Wars themed because, May the 4th be with you and
with you.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun, but it was, I think, 900 off-road vehicles.
Okay.
And it's a family event. So you probably had almost 2,000 people there that
Okay.
weekend. And it's a 4-day event. So you're off-roading and camping and grilling out.
I'm guessing that takes
Yeah.
a lot of fuel. You can't get great mileage. So is it gas,
Yep.
diesel, and did trucks come
Yeah.
along and tank up?
So most of them are gas. There are a few people out there running diesel. And most of them, it's whatever the vehicle manufacturer. So in the US, most of our cars are gas.
Yeah.
So that's what most of us have. But, there are some people that carry spare gas cans on the back of their vehicles. I have a few. I don't carry them with me most of the time because most of the time I'm not that far from a gas station.
Sure.
On the road, I probably get around 14 miles a gallon. So I'm actually crushing it by comparison.
Yeah. For an 04. Yeah. Congrats.
Yeah. 04 V8 engine. Yeah. That's doing pretty good.
And is that the vehicle you take to and from work? Like you're going to go
Yeah,
into
that's
the
my daily
office.
driver.
That's your car. Okay.
Yeah. That's what I drive every day. And that was part of why I chose that vehicle is it's got all the safety of a Lexus and the reliability. And it's a very comfortable ride. Some of these rides, once you start modifying them, when you put in off-road suspensions and these big beefy tires, you can go from having a smooth ride to having a rough ride pretty fast. This one's the first one that I've had that my parents were happy to ride in.
Okay. The people who got you into it in Colorado in the first place. And is it standard safety belts or is it more of a harness kind of setup?
So mine are all standard safety belts because I'm not doing anything that crazy. I'm not like the buggies that I was talking about before. They all have like the 5-point like racing harnesses and they're strapped in and like they can't move around at all. I'm using normal seat belts because I know what the limits of the vehicle are, but I'm not going anywhere near them because it's my daily driver, right? Like you go out for a weekend of fun and you roll your vehicle and now you don't have a car.
Yeah. Monday's coming.
Yeah, exactly. So
Have you rolled a vehicle?
I've never rolled a vehicle.
Okay.
I have done a 3-point track stance before or as we called it, the Toyota Wave, where the vehicle's on 2 wheels and then it rocks back and forth. So it rocks back and touches the back wheel and your front wheel's kind of up there waving.
Like a stool that isn't quite right.
So I've done that.
The Toyota Wave. Surely any vehicle with 4 contact points can get askew like that.
They can, but so Toyotas have independent front suspension.
Right. Might as well be driving a minivan.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes it a lot more comfortable to drive on the road. But when you get into really hairy, awkward positions off-road, it limits the travel of your wheel. So Jeeps have a solid front axle suspension, so their wheels can stay in contact with the ground better at weirder, more awkward angles. Whereas Toyotas, you end up with one wheel up in the air.
So in a Jeep, it's like a teeter-totter with a fulcrum at the center so that...
Yeah.
No wonder they break. Okay.
So with
Yeah.
So with tires and with your 4x4, you have, I presume, a full-size spare on the back, correct?
I do, yes.
Okay, so, and that makes sense because there's wear and tear and you can have a puncture, so you want a spare. So take me back to the trail where you're underneath swapping out a drive shaft. Do you also take spare drive shafts with you on these trips?
Lots of people do.
I didn't expect you to say that, but here we are.
I did not. Now, that one is not a part that normally breaks. What it turned out is the person who owned the Jeep before me, because I bought it used, the guy that had owned it before me had swapped it out with a cheap knockoff overseas drive shaft. So it was a real thin wall. So they shouldn't shear like that. Like that, what happened should not happen I'd only had it for like a month at that point. So I hadn't really that was what we call it, the shakedown run. That was my first trail run with it to find out kind of how it handled. So that was not a good impression. My wife was not impressed.
But then go over this whole thing top to bottom to see what else is substandard.
Yeah.
And okay.
Exactly.
Has your family gotten into it? You mentioned the Jamboree is a family event. Is the daughter and the wife enthusiastic as you are?
So my daughter hasn't gone with this yet. She's about to turn 4. So she's been a little too young for most of this. But my wife goes with me, and she's British. So she grew up over in England. They don't have off-roading really over there. Not much.
Aren't they responsible for Land Rovers? And that's British, right? Range Rover?
Yeah. Land Rovers are trash. No, so the joke about Land Rovers is if you want to go, and this is an Australian joke, if you want to go into the outback, take a Land Rover. If you want to come back from the outback, take a Land Cruiser.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, Land Rovers are a British car, but over there's kind of two takes on the Land Rovers. They're either a farm truck.
Yep.
Because they don't have F-150s. So that's like the national farm truck is a Land Rover.
Sure.
Or they're high-end luxury vehicles that like your multi-millionaire billionaires drive around, kind of like a Mercedes G-Wagon. And so there's a slang term. It's kind of like the soccer mom. It's like the rich soccer mom slang term that they have over there. I can't remember the name of it right now, but there's like a stereotype for, rich ladies driving Land Rovers and G-Wagons that have never seen mud. So they have a term for that.
Probably profane.
It's not. We wouldn't want to repeat it on air anyway.
Okay.
I think it's interesting that there's a Brit living in Texas. That's a reality show I need to see.
Not only is she living in Texas, she is now the Texas State bat biologist.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Science
We're going to
guy.
have you back.
Yeah.
And I was thinking earlier, you were talking about driving at night in your military days. Is this off-roading? I'm guessing it's the sort of thing that's best done when the sun is in the sky because things can get sort of sideways once the sun goes down. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So generally it's done during the day. But at these events, most of the time they do night runs. And so you'll get groups that'll go out at night. And usually for that, you see driving around the big light bars on top, or the big spotlight looking things. So those are what you use for nighttime driving off-road.
If you don't have night vision goggles.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, I left them on days.
I've thought about getting night vision goggles and then putting on infrared headlamps on mine. It's a cool idea. If I had a ranch that I was driving around on, I might do it. But if you're driving with other people, they're going to have their normal headlights on anyway.
If I got terrifying them.
Yeah, exactly. If I got a group of my military buddies together and we all had them and went and did it, that would be fun. But that's also a lot of money to spend on something that I'd probably only ever do once.
Yeah. It's a hobby.
So
is this the sort of thing that service members often take up when they get out, or
there's a lot of veterans in the different groups that I'm in, so it's not uncommon. And it's also a community that tends to connect with military and veterans. Here in Texas, there's an annual off-roading event that is all geared around people, off-road enthusiasts, volunteering their time and their vehicles to take disabled veterans off-road and show them a good time for a weekend.
Sure.
And I've wanted to sign up for that a couple times, and just because of calendar and conflicts, I haven't been able to do it yet.
Someday.
But that would be awesome. You sign up, you say how many passenger seats you have in your vehicle, and then on the day, veterans and disabled veterans show up and
pile in,
hop in, and you go have a good time.
Are there special memories? I mean, you talked about times you've been spending crawling around in the dirt, fixing things. Are there special favorable memories that you look back on and that you love to tell people about from this hobby?
Oh, yeah. So when we lived out in San Diego, we did a 4-day off-road trip across the Mojave Desert.
Okay. So you take your water and your gas then.
Yeah, you take extra everything. And my wife and I and one of my Navy friends, she hopped in the back of my FJ Cruiser, which couldn't have been comfortable because that's not a big back seat. And then another couple friend went and rented a Dodge Ram 1500 4x4 from like Hertz Rental or something. They had never gone off road. They'd never driven 4-wheel drive.
Zero skills. Yeah.
Zero skills in a rental vehicle that was completely set up for the street. Not,
Yeah.
the running boards were falling off, and we had to use one of my ratchet straps to strap it down before we even got to the trail. That was on the highway. We weren't
You've
even out of
already-
San Diego yet.
You've already bandaged it up.
Yeah.
Hope they picked up the optional insurance.
Yeah, they did. Absolutely. But that was a blast because it was 4 days out in the desert, and you get into these areas that very few people have actually been to. And the Mojave Trail is this trail. Now it's an off-road trail, but it was the original trail that settlers came across when they were coming from the east over to the San Diego area, to the West Coast.
Your version of the Oregon Trail.
Yeah, it was the Southern California version of the Oregon Trail. That's exactly what it was. And so there's these old stone buildings. Like this was the watering outpost where people would stop and water their horses. And like this is where the mail carriers would change horses and sleep for the night. And just some really cool like American history kind of stuff that if you're not getting out there into the wilderness, you don't get to see this.
Right.
There's towards the end of the trail, there's this massive salt flats, and you have to stay on like this single track trail that all the vehicles drive on because the salt flats are so like the sand is so soft. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
flour powder kind
Air
of salt
intake. Right. Yeah.
that well, your vehicle would just sink and you would never get it out. Like you would have to call an off-road tow company and they would have to come out, and those are expensive.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
To
Yeah.
tow your vehicle out. And there's like a rundown like bus from the 60s or 70s just out in the middle of the desert. And
Stuck.
a bunch of, yeah. Well, no, it was just abandoned out there. I think somebody had like taken it out there to live in and then decided that a bus isn't the best thing to live in a desert or something. I don't know.
Go
I'm
figure.
not sure what the story is behind the bus. Maybe somebody else does, but it's just weird. There's like a rock garden out in the desert. Of course, there's a rock garden, but people have like super glued like random toy collections to it. So there's like the troll dolls with like the big colorful hair. There's like a bunch of those out there, and it's like this weird like toy shrine thing. It kind of a modern art. I don't know. It was interesting to walk around and see it and look at it.
California.
And just wonder, yeah, that's kind of that's the groove.
Is this something you get to do with colleagues and clients, and that any of them ever interested in going out on the trail with you?
Not yet. And I thought about doing, when I looked at starting my own firm a few years ago, I thought about possibly choosing the off-road community as a niche.
Yeah. Because you said a bunch of them are small business owners, and
they
time,
are
discretion income, a certain turn of mind, certain
well,
problems to solve. It meets most of the criteria of a niche, sort of.
Importance of
It does.
budgeting.
You know where to find them.
except that they're not good at any of that for the most part. A lot of
Wow.
it is people blowing money that like what should not be considered discretionary income getting spent as discretionary income.
Not the ideal client for the
No.
long term.
And most of
buddies.
them are not necessarily looking to make long-term plans. Their long-term plan is pouring their money into their off-road rig.
Carpe diem.
Yeah.
These folks are to
So-
insure. You get life insurance if you're regularly doing the Toyota Wave?
Probably.
Probably. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It is also, off-roading is not covered by your normal auto insurance.
Interesting.
So, like, if you blow out your axle,
That's
Geico's
on-
not going to cover you.
That's on you. Okay.
Now, I think there are some specialist, like, off-road insurance companies out there, but they're not going to be cheap.
There's a Lloyd's of London for your segment.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I'm sure there
All right.
is.
And if somebody wanted to dip their toe in the water and think about doing this, then they should not go to their local Hertz counter, I guess. But what should they do to explore about whether this might be fun or not for them?
I would say start by finding a friend or making a friend who has an off-road vehicle and go ride along with them.
And you can tell because they can't hide them, right?
Right. Yeah. It shows up. Like
You'll know.
every off-road vehicle says 4x4 on the back because they all, every vehicle manufacturer wants you to know, oh no, this one is the F-150 with 4x4. So it's not going to be a surprise.
All right. All right. Well, this has been fascinating. I try not to anticipate the direction that the conversations go. And I'm always surprised and almost always pleasantly surprised. And this has been really good. Anything further from you, Brian, before we wind this down?
No, I know more than I did before. It's in just hiking with 4 tires, and that was probably the extent of what I knew about it. So this is great. Thanks for coming on. Yeah.
If somebody wanted to learn more about you and the professional work that you're doing, where would they find more of Drew?
So you can go to legacyconsultinggroup.com. That's our company's website. You can also find me on LinkedIn, which is, I think it's at Drew Schlatter. And then I've got 2 YouTube channels that I'm now running. One and the other one is College Money Talk.
Excellent. Excellent. And I'm hoping, fingers crossed, you have some sort of presentable photograph of your vehicle that you can send along for the show notes.
Yes. Yeah.
Please.
I'll send off
Please.
some photo. Absolutely.
A picture of you with your feet sticking out from underneath it. That would be good. All right. Thank you so much, Drew. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Unexpected Hobbies of Financial Advisors is brought to you by Fiduciary CFO, forward-thinking tax and planning solutions for business owners, like RIA firms and their business owner clientele. The opinions of Brian, Joshua, and their guests are for entertainment purposes and should not be construed as legal, tax, financial, or investment advice. You should know better than to take any of this content seriously. Thanks for being a fan of the show. If you were listening and thought to yourself, hey, I know somebody they need to have on the show, you can do something about that. Go to unexpectedhobbies.com/nominate and tell us who they are and what they do that's so interesting and unexpected. If we agree, we'll send them an invitation and we'll hope they say yes. Now it's unexpectedhobbies.com/nominate.